Any questions before we get started? Good. Okay.
I wanted to ask about the Z-score and how definitive that kind of prediction was.
Talk more by definitive. What do you mean?
Well, because it sounded like the idea here was you're getting a number, from 0 to 2 plus, and that was going to give you an idea of how likely bankruptcy was. So, yeah, I was just wondering, how absolute is that kind of predictor?
I think it's pretty darn accurate based on the research that was done. I think, as I suggested last week, I would look at that a couple ways. One is I would look at that as your business credit score. So look at it as you would your FICO score. We look at that because we know that that's how our credit worthiness is determined on a personal basis. And I think the Z score could be looked at the same way in terms of your business, in terms of your business credit worthiness. Every bank calculates in making a lending decision, every bank calculates using your financials something very close to that Z score, if not the exact same calculation. So I think if you're familiar with that number before you go to the bank, have some sense of where it is relative to where maybe it should be, I think that's a very good thing. The second consideration, and I think equally important, Rick, is how is it trending? What direction is it going? So if you calculated it and it was 3, then what was it a year ago? What was it 2 years ago? Where would you like it to be? And then begin thinking about, just again, like your FICO score. If I want to improve my FICO score, I may say, well, I need to reduce my debt. I need to pay my bills quicker, whatever. I think the same thing with your Z score is what strategies could I employ to improve that Z score, to raise that Z score. I think that's where my head would be. For many of the clients that I work with, and I've seen hundreds of Z scores, they average for most businesses between 5 and 10 is where I see a lot of Z scores, between 5 and 10. The highest that I've ever seen was in the mid 30s. I want to say 35, which was astronomical high as a Z score. I remember looking at that number with the client and thinking, my goodness, how did you get such a high Z score? And so then we looked at his financials. This was a relatively small general contractor here in Atlanta. They were doing maybe $3 or $4 million a year in construction projects. And so we looked at his income statement, balance sheet, and what got my attention right away was on his balance sheet, he had over $1 million in cash in the bank, in his bank account, over $1 million, which for a relatively small company seemed like a lot of cash. And if you remember, one of the components of the Z score is your liquidity, current assets minus current liabilities. And so that $1 million in cash, that liquidity, caused his Z score to be extremely high. In fact, I would even argue that it was an inflated number, maybe artificially high. And I remember asking my client, I said, wow, you've got over $1 million of cash in the bank. That seems like a lot. And his response to me was, I sleep really well at night. Because his business was extremely cyclical, construction company, projects in, projects out, projects in, very cyclical business. And he just thought to be safe, he needed to have a lot of cash in the bank, which again, it kind of inflated his Z score. And then I remember asking him a question that he didn't particularly like. His name was Hayden. I said, Hayden, what return are you getting on that $1 million that you have in your bank account? His response was, Tim, they don't even give me a toaster. I get zero return on, they weren't even paying him interest on that money he had in the bank. But again, he felt, safe having that much cash in the bank at all times. So his Z score was inflated. So that's why I say, when you look at it, if it's really high, ask yourself, why is it so high? If it's really low, ask yourself what's causing it to be as low as it is. And then look at the trending and again, ask those same questions. Why is it getting higher? Why is it declining? And then the final thought, Rick, is and I think I might have shared this with you last week. Understand that every strategic decision that you make within your business impacts that Z score, whether it's a hiring decision, bringing on a significant client, purchasing a piece of equipment, opening up into a new market. Every significant strategic decision impacts that Z score. So what I'd like for you to get in the practice of is when you're making those decisions, ask yourself, what impact is this going to have on my Z score? What impact is this going to have on my company's financial performance? And just kind of get in that mindset as you're making those decisions. So that was a very long-winded answer to your question. I hope that was helpful.